In Montreal, it snowed. I waited on the platform and watched the Via Rail train crawl towards me. I prepared my words for Nat, going over them. I wanted to tell her face to face how close I had felt to her along my journey, that the distance and silence between us made us feel more intimate with her now that I had returned. As I stepped into my railway carriage's warmth, I already felt her embrace. I began the 14-hour journey east to Bathurst. It snowed the whole way. The trees, electricity poles, and people made silhouettes against the bright winter sky. I woke up at about 8 a.m. and glimpsed Nat standing on the Bathurst station platform. She looked relieved when I stepped out. I spotted no animosity in her expression. She said I should tell her everything, where I had been, what I had seen. But later, she said. She was exhausted. When I got home, I unpacked my bags and started with my chores, the dishes, laundry, a supermarket run, and a doctor's visit, after both Raphael and I came down with the flu. My duties here as a husband and father were more private than my work, and quietly comforting. We prepared to leave Canada in a few months. Nat had a job at the United Nations in Rwanda, which they had kept open while she was on maternity leave. The job offered us diplomatic immunity, which would help my reporting on the dictatorship there, alongside Lewis. A storm brewed near the Arctic Circle, not so far from Shipping. Nat and I sheltered indoors and followed the war on her television. For a short while, the war in the Central African Republic burst into the open, no longer hiding itself. The anti-Balaka launched their massive counterattack from their hideouts. The government should never have received the United Nations support, but as the rebels rose, the government lost its foreign backers at that crucial moment. The UN passed a belated resolution to disarm the soldiers. Its diplomats seemed unaware of the rebels' strength. French peacekeepers forced the soldiers to lay down their arms while promising they would keep the peace, but they didn't have enough troops to secure the country. And without the soldiers, the country's Muslims became exposed. The rebels fanned out their army of an estimated 100,000 fighters from PK-100 and other secret locations against the government's few thousand soldiers. More than 1 million Central Africans had fled their homes. 1.5 million people suffered from acute hunger. Still, no one had counted the number of dead. Bangui had been home to around 140,000 Muslims. In a few weeks after the anti-Balaka attack, only 1,000 Muslims remained. The country's Muslim population fell by around 80%. Muslims were hacked down in their homes and in hiding. Many fled the country. The anti-Balaka attacked mosques. Foreign journalists flew into Bangui to document this carnage, which was broadcast live on TV and featured on the front pages of newspapers. The TV news broadcast images of men wearing skull caps, chased in the streets, swiped at with knives. The men arched their bodies, trying to escape. Spectators calmly observed them, their hands behind their backs, as if they watched children playing games. Muslims' bodies were dismembered like they were toys. The war became an international spectacle. The overt attacks had a purpose: to publicly eliminate Islam from the country's national identity. The UN sent in international investigators, people like Lewis, to document and assess the anti-Balaka's crimes. These investigators declared the rebels' killing as ethnic cleansing. The investigators avoided using the term genocide. The anti-Balaka, they said, only tried to clear Muslims out of the country. They classified as exceptions the killing of Muslims fleeing the country. They didn't find evidence that the mostly Christian anti-Balaka had planned to exterminate the Muslims. From the comfort of my bed in Shippingen, Nat lying beside me, I followed the catastrophe. Food, medicine, and fuel quickly became unaffordable. The price of cooking oil rose from $1.5 per kilogram to $30. The rebels killed with impunity, exacting their own justice upon those they perceived to be criminals, or children who they believed might become criminals in the future. They carried out their own form of justice based on the things they imagined. The foreign journalists left Bangui after a week or so. The war faded from the news and from the world's consciousness. The defeated Muslim government also retreated into the northern countryside, where the rebellion had begun more than a year earlier. They declared a new Muslim nation and broke up the country. Watching the television news, Nat said, "Did you travel to Busangoa?" I said I hadn't. "Did you meet that official who's speaking now?" I hadn't. She tried to imagine me over there, and my refusals confused him. Where had I traveled? Whom had I met? The war broadcast on the television was separate from the one I had known. Tell me everything, she said.